It's another mad week in boxing, people. We've got Devin Haney calling out Jack Catterall after his win over Regis Prograis. Campbell Hatton, son of the famous Ricky, getting another defeat on his record. Where does he go from here? Canelo Alvarez versus Eubank Jr. is reportedly once again in the supposed works. And we've got more from Tyson Fury ahead of his rematch with Alexander Usyk. He said there was going to be no changes to the corner, but it turns out there might be some. We're going to get into it all in this video. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. Guys, I've had a pretty shaky start to the week. I got a cold or man flu, whatever you want to call it, on Friday. And yeah, I've been feeling extremely under the weather, but I'm finally on the mend and I'm well enough now to do this video. Luckily, because there's some really interesting stuff to talk about this week. Guys, before I get into this, don't forget to like the video if you like it, obviously. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and please get your comments in the comment section below about any of the stuff we talked about today, but in particular, you know, Campbell Hatton, do you think he should continue? What do you think about that Eubank Jr. against Canelo fight? And what do you think about Devin Haney against Jack Catterall? Is that a fight that you'd like to see? Or do you think that that might be a bit of a snooze fest in terms of a stylistic matchup? I'm not really sure. It's a very technical, very fiddly one, but we'll have to think about that some more. But anyway, let's get into it. I thought we'd begin by talking about the Jack Catterall fight because it was the biggest event over the weekend. I was planning on doing something post-fight, but I was just too sick. So I thought we'll just have at least a chat about it now. But Catterall's a really interesting one because I think he's a very, very talented fighter. He's someone who I actually spent a little bit of time around him. I used to go and film in Jamie Moore's gym from time to time. Jamie Moore is his coach, for those of you that don't know. And he's a very nice lad, very nice guy. And he's always been highly touted in that gym. They've been talking about him for years. And it's good to see him getting these sort of more high-profile wins now on his record. He's somebody that probably should have a world title. And at 140 pounds, it's an interesting division for him to be in right now. There's some good fights to make. And I'm really intrigued to see what they can do with him moving forward. I'll talk about the fight first, and then we can have a little think about where he goes next. But a lot of people don't enjoy his style. A lot of people think he's quite boring. And he is hard to market, you have to say that. I mean, he is a pure counterpuncher as far as I'm concerned. The things I notice about him when he boxes are just how much he relies on the other person making the fight. Because he is such a counterpuncher, he will always do things to nullify what you're doing, but he's not the best at leading off himself. And, you know, it results in fights being quite close, but he does tend to edge them. I think that the fight with Prograis was interesting. A lot of people had it extremely close. One thing that's fair to call into question is the depth of his record to date. He's obviously had that big, high-profile win over Josh Taylor, and should have really got the decision in the first fight, most probably. I feel that there is more to come from Catterall. I think that he needs to do more in the ring to entertain. And I think that he needs to get in the mix with some guys who are a bit fresher. You know, I know in that first Taylor fight, Taylor wasn't the same Taylor because he'd come off that long-term knee injury. In the rematch, you know, I don't know. I mean, Taylor's lost back-to-back fights now. He lost against Teofimo, he lost against Catterall. The way that he lost those fights, I just don't know if a prime Taylor would have lost them the way he did. He may have always lost them, but I thought he was so good, Taylor, when he was in his prime. So I find it hard to believe that he would have lost them the way he did at his peak. But thinking about the fight specifically, it was a close fight. And I think that the thing with Catterall is because he's so side on, I really like it defensively because it makes a much smaller target for the opponent. But the one thing that it does do is it takes his backhand out of play. Because his right foot is so far back, it means your right hand has further to travel to hit the opponent. And you saw it quite a bit in the fight. His right hand came up short whenever he threw it at Prograis. There was times when he landed clean ones, but that was when it was a nicely timed counterpunch when Prograis really stepped into his space and committed, and Jack was able to time the counter right. Other than that, though, it was really his jab that was important. And it's not often that you see Catterall really throwing anything other than a single shot or a 1-2. The beauty of him and his boxing ability is really in his feet. And they're not really, really flashy feet, but they're very, very disciplined, very, very correct feet. He's always on balance. He always repositions. He's very, very good at making sure his feet are exactly as they should be to be able to counterpunch. And, you know, if you want to take a look at someone who struggled with this, trying to counterpunch, it was AJ in the Dubois fight, where he was constantly trying to get his feet right, and in between Dubois was just messing him up, basically. And, you know, I think Catterall is an example of somebody who has refined that style and is very, very good at it. I think in terms of what he needs someone to bring the absolute best out of him. He needs someone who's going to be aggressive and make the fight because, you know, I don't see Catterall straying away from that style. But, you know, to prove my point about the counter-punching nature of his style and the fact that it was close against Prograis, but he did win. I think that you've seen it throughout his career. He's had close fights. Even against Ohara Davies, who you would consider him to be quite a few levels above. That was a very, very nip and tuck, very, very close fight. Because he relies on you making the fight. He will react to what you give him. It's like, a good analogy is two counter-attacking football sides. If you put a counter-attacking football side against a big team that's offensive and attacking, then lots of chances to counter. It's going to make for a different looking fight, and you might nick it 1-0, even though the other team might have been more aggressive. You might nick it 1-0. If you put two counter-attacking sides together, suddenly it's quite dull, suddenly it's quite boring. If a team doesn't take too many chances, then it makes the counterpuncher look like they're winning by less, that they're less dominant. So the issue with that style is, as I say, you're always relying on someone else to make the fight, and it's just not as entertaining. But I think he's the kind of fighter that can beat most guys because he is so sound with his feet. His defense is very, very good, and he doesn't waste his punches. I think the fight that I'd like to see at 140 when he's back would be Ryan Garcia. In terms of a style matchup, in terms of an interesting fight, in terms of the highest profile winner I think that Jack Catterall could get would be that Ryan Garcia fight. Ryan's a lot faster than Jack, but Jack's so correct and Ryan does make a lot of mistakes. So I think it would be one of those fights where it could go either way, but I think it would be very, very entertaining. And I think that would be a fight that would bring the best out of Jack Catterall. It's not just in the ring that he relies on other people to make the fight, but also outside the ring. You know, he's not someone who is really braggadocious or flamboyant. He's a very reserved, very nice guy. And he kind of gives you the energy you give him. He's never really one to add needle to it for no reason. You know, with Taylor really made that dynamic. Taylor was the one that really sold the fight. So I think for Jack, he needs a good dance partner. He needs guys that are going to bring the best out of him. That Devin Haney fight, I would favor Devin Haney in that fight, just because I think that he's a bit quicker. He's also a very, very good boxer, and I just think he's a little bit more correct than Jack is in some ways. Obviously, he showed fundamental flaws when, you know, he got battered by Garcia, and you can say what you want about the peds and stuff, but there were flaws that were there from Haney that meant that he got caught with that hook. But very different skill set, completely different skill set, Garcia to Catterall. I'd say almost complete opposites in a way. And I think that Haney against Catterall would be a really interesting matchup. It's one that I'd like to see, but it would be a very, very boxy kind of fight. I think it would be nip and tuck, and I think it would be a case of, I think Haney's got a style where he can implement things and be a bit more busy than Jack can. And I think that's what would probably sway the judges, but hard to say at this stage. I'd need to do a proper analysis to make my mind up. But overall, a good win for Jack Catterall, and now he really needs to fight guys who are a little bit more in their prime. As I say, all his biggest wins, really, for me, they've kind of got asterisks against them in terms of where was that guy at the time that they fought, and that's been the criticism of this Prograis, and that Prograis is kind of at the end. Same thing with Linares, and in my opinion, same thing with Taylor. Not to the same extent, but I don't think Taylor was the same Taylor when they actually fought. A Teofimo Lopez fight would be absolutely amazing at 140 as well, but I think he might be at 147 now. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. But lots of good fights to make. In this tweet here, Devin Haney says, Jack Catterall said, big respect, champ, ready when you are. Haney said, be careful what you ask for. Only one person can make that fight with Jack Cat, and that's Turki Al Sheikh. And I would assume what he's referring to there is the fact that he would need to be paid handsomely, and the money probably isn't really there to fight Jack Catterall unless Turki gets involved. So that injection of money gets the division moving, and that's the kind of fight that just, it's a fight that I don't see that being made unless someone's going to put up big money. So yes, but I do think that will be a good fight, and I'd like to see it. Moving on, let's have a quick chat about Campbell Hatton losing to, what was the guy called? Jimmy Joe Flint. Now, I've not really followed Campbell since he turned over. I've seen bits and pieces of him. I was never too impressed when he first turned over, and, you know, I think he's the kind of guy where had that short amateur career. There was so much hype around him when he turned over. I remember Matchroom cut so many awesome promo videos and edits, the sort of the Blue Moon song, you know, reigniting that sort of Ricky Hatton legacy with the Man City connection, obviously, and Campbell coming through. You know, it was very, very exciting because they look so similar as well. And it's just such a promotable situation. And we've seen it with legacy fighters, with Sons of Champions. You know, we'll talk about Eubank Jr. in a bit, but he's a great example. Nigel Benn, of course, as well. But unfortunately, it's looking like Campbell Hatton just doesn't have the required level of talent to go all the way to the top. I don't think he punches hard enough. I think his defense is far too leaky. And it's absolutely fine, you know, to continue if he wants to, but I don't know what the point is. You could do it for the love of the game, sure. But if it's to make a living and to move forward and to have a career as a professional fighter, as a champion, most importantly, then I'm not sure it's worth it. But I wanted to read this because Ricky Hatton posted this really nice message. He said, another one close one for the lad last night. Everyone has their view. I thought he lost the first fight by narrowest of margins. Thought he won the second fight last night, also by the narrowest of margins. But one thing for certain is that they were both great, close fights that could have gone either way. Congrats to Jimmy Joe Flint, great lad. Respectful like I found his whole family. Best of luck to you, Jimmy. As for my son, chin up, have a rest, have a think. Don't think you'll ever know how much I love you and how proud we all are of you. No father could be more blessed. I feel proud that every day I get the chance to say to people, that's my boy, love dad. Which is obviously a beautiful, heartfelt message. And I think that's what every son would like to hear from their father, right? But I hope that he's realistic, and I hope that he continues because he enjoys boxing. And if he wants to try and improve, then fine. He's a young lad still. He's like 23 years old, I believe. But it really puts into perspective just how good some of these other sons of champions have actually managed to get. Because it always seems that when you go to the next one down, they're not quite as good. Things aren't quite the same. And certainly you could say the same for the two I just mentioned a minute ago, Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank Sr., with Conor and Chris Jr. I feel that, they're not as talented as the dads were. But then, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's sort of nature versus nurture. Is it the nurture that's made them perceivably less talented because they haven't had that life of ridiculous hardship? Does it take away a percentage of ability? I'm not sure. And I think we know that hunger contributes massively in boxing. Mindset does. Motivations contribute to so much of a fighter's success. And so perhaps that's what it is. Maybe it's just a motivational thing. But we don't know. We don't know what the camps are like. Regardless, I had a look at the highlights of the fight, and it was very, very close. And if you're having a war at that kind of level, it doesn't bode too well for the future. And it's hard to have that sort of long building process in the pro game because it's so much more punishing than the amateurs, which is why a lot of guys, will just do the amateur circuit for a long time and then turn over because you get that experience in the ring. There's a lot of differences, but there are enough similarities that it's worthwhile doing. It's a shame that he didn't stay amateur for longer, in my opinion, but I suppose that the moment was there for him to go pro and to do it, and perhaps they felt his style was better suited to the pros. But yeah, it's quite a simple one for me. I don't think it's a big deal. If he wants to keep going, no problem. I just don't think it's going to be in the high-profile nature that he wants for now, at least. But if I was him, I'd take, as his dad said, take your time to think about things. But if you love the sport and you just want to keep going, give yourself 3-4 years and then try and come back at the top level, because he's got time. He's got time to go and develop his game and refine his craft. Up next, Ben Shalom has been saying that they're in preliminary talks for Canelo Alvarez versus Chris Eubank Jr. Now, preliminary talks could literally be, I've sent an email saying we would like to make the fight with you, because preliminary means we haven't even started actual negotiations, actual talks around the fight. I think the word preliminary can be used very liberally. So how far along this actually is, we don't know. There was obviously talk about this fight being made before they made the Canelo against Berlanga fight. And Eubank Jr. said himself that he rejected the Canelo fight because he wanted to have a warm-up because he wasn't ready yet, claiming that he wants to have the best chance possible of beating Canelo. I think that Canelo is a horrible, horrible fight for Eubank Jr. in terms of winning the fight, but in terms of, financially, it's a very, very lucrative matchup for Eubank, and I can see why he'd want it. Who would not want that Canelo fight if you're around 160, 168, even 175? I think even Jamel Charlo came up from 154 to need to fight Canelo. I'm not sure if he had a fight at 160 before that. But regardless, it's... Sorry, guys, I'm struggling a bit here. But regardless, it's a fight that I think might well get made. This is exactly the sort of profile of fighter that Canelo wants to take on right now, where they're not the top level in terms of talent, but they have a decent profile. And Canelo knows, because he's so big now, that as long as they're of a certain level and they can make it a certain level of competitiveness in the fight, that's the main thing for him, because he will just keep generating that revenue. He'll keep making his money, and no one can really tell him what to do. Is Eubank Jr. going to make him as much money as, for example, a Benavidez fight would? Maybe it might not be far off. I don't know if you could get Canelo to come to the UK, but in terms of tickets sold, I reckon if you did Canelo Eubank in the UK, that would be a very, very lucrative fight in terms of the gate. I think a lot of people in the UK would like to watch Canelo fight. Canelo's mentioned before that he'd like to fight in the UK, although that could just be a very standard stock answer. In terms of how I see that fight going, I just think that, we saw Eubank get stopped by Liam Smith. Now, he said he wasn't right in that fight, but I don't know. And Eubank has declined a little bit. I think the Eubank of a few years back that had that undeniably good chin, the one who had the really high punch output, just a fresher Eubank, I think he would have been more interesting in a fight like this, but Canelo, of course, also would have been fresher then, and I feel that at any point in their given careers, Canelo wins this fight comfortably, and I don't see it being any different here. I just don't think Eubank has the power to trouble Canelo. I don't think he has the gas tank anymore to implement the kind of fight that he would need to beat Canelo, and I just see Canelo very comfortably counterpunching his way through the fight and knocking Eubank Jr. out, most likely, because you know, Eubank isn't that big. He's been fighting really big guys, Canelo, and Eubank's feet are not great, and he plants his feet. So I could definitely see Canelo winning this one comfortably. I think his chin is too good as well. I don't think Eubank will really be able to hurt him. So yeah, but look, it'll be an absolutely amazing event. I'd love to watch it, and I will do a proper analysis if it does get made, because, you know, I don't like to ever assume that I'm right based on a gut feeling, just a feeling around it. I always want to look at the technical intricacies, so there may be things Eubank can do in the fight, but my gut instinct is that it would be a comfortable win for Canelo. Finally, just a quick one on Tyson Fury. I talked about him quite a bit in my last video. We spoke about, I covered the press conference, I reacted to it, looked at some of his psychology, looked at some of the things he was saying, and one of the things that he said was there'd be no changes to the team. To which I said, and it was sort of a question about Sugar Hill, you know, would you consider changing trainers? And he was like, no, why would I? It's my fault, etc., etc. But the biggest thing I commented on was the fact that Sugar Hill's not the problem. It's your dad that's the problem. He's the one that acts like a fool in Fight Week, headbutts guys, tries to make it all about him, and gives contrary advice in the corner to what your head coach is saying, which is completely unhelpful. And Andy Lee has come out and said, Sugar Hill Stewart will be the only voice in the corner for the Usyk rematch. There were a lot of voices in the corner. I should say Andy Lee is his assistant trainer, of course. There was a lot of voices in the corner. We were in a dire situation and had to pull him out of it. I was told he was 2 rounds down, so I had to speak up about that. His dad was giving him great advice, I thought, but he's also a dad, and that's his son. Sugar should have been the only voice, and he will be the only voice in the next fight. So there you go. There is a change to the camp, a very clear one. John will not be in the corner, or at least there'll be the one voice in the corner, and that'll be Sugar Hill. So I think that's a very, very good decision. I think that Fury's saying a lot of different things, but I reckon they are cleaning things up better than Fury's letting on behind the scenes. I think there will be changes tactically. I think the fact that Fury said there'll be no changes, I think the fact he said there'll be no tactical changes, no changes to the team, it did not mention the corner either. I would read into that there's going to be a lot of changes in a lot of different areas, and he's just trying to play it down and create this feeling that things will play out a similar way so that he can't, you know, so he can sort of surprise Usyk almost. Now, again, I'm completely guessing, admittedly, because Fury has said it before in the past what he's going to do in a fight. You know, the Wilder 2 fight, and I'm going to go in there and knock you out because, well, no one thought he would do that, so it was one of them. I remember he boxed an entire open workout southpaw, and then he fought the whole fight orthodox. So you never quite know what's happening with Tyson Fury, but the fact that Andy Lee said that, the fact we have evidence to the contrary of what Tyson Fury is saying, makes me think that he's gone into that thinking, I'm just going to play down everything as much as I can. Act kind of submissive almost to Usyk, and I'm going to go out there and attack him and be vicious and aggressive. I honestly think that could be what's happening here. But I don't think any of it will affect Usyk. I think that Usyk is brilliant. I think he's so confident in what he does, and I think he knows not to fall for anything that Tyson Fury says. But guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you've enjoyed it. If you're new, please like the video. Get your comments in the comment section below about any of the things that I've been talking about today, and I'll put my link to my Discord server in the description as well, where we're trying to get a few conversations going. It's just a nice community we're growing where we can all talk boxing. I feel like it's been a little bit of a quieter period. We're having a little bit of a quieter period post Beterbiev Bivol. I think that the fight at the weekend was good, but we really want those big high-profile clashes, don't we? So it'll be interesting. The other thing I didn't mention today was the fact that they're saying that Joshua Dubois might not be next now. So obviously, I think in my video I had heard that the fight was done. So perhaps there's some second guessing going on with Team Joshua. Perhaps it was never done and I was just making an assumption. But I did hear it was done. So maybe it will happen. I don't know. It's an interesting one. And I'd love to know what you guys think. If you're AJ, what do you do? Because it must be tempting. It must be very, very tempting to take that fight, knowing that there's a world title on a direct shot at a world title. But then again, you kind of reduce your value in that potential Fury fight even further. If they both lose, if he loses to Usyk, then that could be it. So I don't think any decisions will be made for sure before then. But the fact that Dubois has to defend that IBF belt, I think before the end of February, makes it quite a quick turnaround after a knockout like that. Anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed the video. And as I always say, on to the next one.